Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Welcome to the final four of Presidential Fight Club. The arena is strewn with the battered bodies of presidents who did not make it this far. You have all sorts of presidents who didn't make it. Definitely the lesser presidents. Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, probably. Warren G. Harding had to go right to his mistress or had a heart attack. John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, not good presidents, not good fighters either. The Party Boys didn't make it. Bill Clinton, JFK are commiserating over a beer, and Martin Van Buren is there too. A lot of founding fathers, whatever their greatness and stature, are not good fighters. Jefferson, Madison couldn't make it. Madison is too small. John Adams, John Quincy Adams, commiserating over some Marietta. Monroe couldn't make it. The generals, military strategy doesn't translate into effective fighting all the time. Zachary Taylor's out. William Henry Harrison, Grant is out. The physically big presidents, LBJ, Taft, Grover, Cleveland, couldn't use their heft to win their matches. We saw a number of dark horses, too, that James and I were pulling for. Gerald Ford, one of them, very athletic. George Herbert Walker Bush, despite his grandfatherly avuncular nature, could really put up a fight, but didn't make it. Nor did Harry Truman and other dark horses. And none of our modern presidents made it either. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Trump, Nixon, Reagan, all knocked out. So that leaves us with only four remaining presidents: Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and Dwight Eisenhower. It brings us to our first match: Teddy Roosevelt versus Abraham Lincoln. James, why do you think Teddy Roosevelt has what it takes to defeat Abraham Lincoln in one-on-one combat?
All right, well, just a review of all the things we've said before. Theodore Roosevelt, he's not a large man. He's about 5'9" or so, about average, especially for that time. Not a particularly big guy. He did get pretty chunky toward the end of his life, but when he was 35, he was very fit and trim. Theodore Roosevelt is one of the most, let's say, pugnacious presidents we've ever had in our history. He loved to fight, and I mean physically fight, not just politically fight. He was very sickly as a young man, and so his father told him he needed to get his body into shape if he wanted to live a long life. And he did, and he took up all kinds of strenuous exercise. He called it the strenuous life, and he took up weightlifting, he took up running, he took up boxing, and just a whole lot of other physical activities. Very rare for that day. Most people did not just exercise just to get in shape because, well, most Americans didn't have to. Most Americans worked on a farm or in a factory and worked very difficult physical jobs, but of course Roosevelt didn't. He was born to wealth and privilege, very wealthy situation, but that doesn't mean he was a wimp. When he was in his mid-20s, on a very, very sad day, which happened to be Valentine's Day, his mother and his wife both passed away on the same day, and to deal with his grief, he went out west. He started a cattle ranch, and he worked in the fields with the field hands. He did not just sit in an office and give orders. He went out and actually rode his horse around and worked, was in the saddle for 12, 14 hours a day, most days, and he got very, very tough. He was out there in the Montana sun and getting his skin bronzed, and his hands got tough, and he was very, very strong after that as well. He continued boxing his entire life. He loved it. Running and other things. He played some sports as well. He actually, by the time he was president, when he was in the White House, actually, he took up jiu-jitsu. And of course, I skipped over his service in the Spanish-American War. He understood the concept of what it's like to be in combat. He had a nice desk job at the beginning of the Spanish-American War in 1898, which he could have held down, but he didn't want to sit at a desk. He wanted to get out there and fight. So he resigned from his comfortable desk job and went out and raised a volunteer regiment, and they went out and fought against the Spanish in Cuba and from that, he was also made even tougher. And as I was about to say a minute ago before I decided to go back to the Spanish-American War, when he was in the White House, he boxed. He would bring people in. He had a boxing ring installed in the White House. He would box people just for fun. One time, he got hit in the eye, and he had his glasses on, and it kind of damaged his eye quite a bit. So he retired from boxing after that. But he also took up jiu-jitsu, and he rose up to the level of brown belt, or judo. Some sources say judo, some say jiu-jitsu. They're a little bit different, but they're similar in some ways. So martial artist, boxer, combat veteran, all-around tough guy, cowboy. This guy has got what it takes. He is tough, tough, tough.
That's Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, so for Abraham Lincoln, I can't believe we've mentioned Lincoln multiple times, 5, 6, 7 times. Both James and I have defended him. And I've never mentioned the quote from the movie Fight Club, even though we're doing a Fight Club podcast series. There's one exchange between the narrator and Tyler Durden where they're talking about which historical figure they'd fight. Tyler Durden says, okay, any historical figure. I'd fight Gandhi. Good answer. How about you? Lincoln. Lincoln? Big guy, big reach. Skinny guys fight till they're burger. Well, even though Tyler Durden is a figment of the narrator's imagination, that is an accurate statement because Lincoln did fight until he was burger. We've mentioned how he was kind of the terror of Southern Illinois in the wrestling circuit. In his town of New Salem, he gained a reputation as a local elite fighter. He won his county's wrestling championship. This type of wrestling was purely a test of strength where combatants lock horns to prove their dominance. And Lincoln, as we know, he's our tallest president, 6'4", skinny guy. He had a disease called Marfan syndrome, which affects limbs, makes them longer, and others think that it was what led to his melancholy that he suffered throughout his life. He was taller than the average person, but he grew up in the Midwestern frontier and spent thousands of hours chopping wood, built his first log cabin when he was 7. According to Dennis Hanks, who lived in the town of New Salem, if you heard his felling trees in a clearing, you would say there was 3 men at work by the way the trees fell. So he has an incredible power to weight ratio. We've mentioned the story where in New Salem, when he shows up, there are these local ruffians who challenge Lincoln to a wrestling match. He bests the leader of the group, the Grove Boys, Clary's Grove Boys, and is able to take out not only the leader, but others and pick him up and just throw him like a rag doll. So in terms of frontier wrestling, he has a high power to weight ratio. But I'd like to mention one other factor that we haven't mentioned with Lincoln. We've tied in other factors with presidents in this contest when we go beyond their physical stamina, their military experience, their fighting capacity. And that's parts of their character. Sometimes it can be negative qualities put to a fight, like LBJ's abilities to intimidate people. Other times it can be sheer raw perseverance and competitiveness. And when we think of Lincoln, let's just get romantic for a second. Let's get Ralph Waldo Emerson style romantic. And when we look at Lincoln, if we've been to the Lincoln Memorial in DC, you feel like you're in this aura of greatness. And how would that tie into him as a fighter? A great book about Lincoln is called Lincoln's Melancholy by Joshua Schenck. That's a psychological profile. Lincoln suffered terrible melancholy throughout his life. As a young man, as a young senator, people thought that he was suicidal based on the things that he said, his very gloomy look. Throughout his life, people commented how he looks like one of the most depressed, saddest people I've ever seen. And in his private letters and his correspondence, that definitely comes out. But the point of the book, Lincoln's Melancholy, is that the reason that he was able to achieve the greatness that he did and to remain steadfast and persevere throughout the Civil War, when half of the nation hates him, when many of his own cabinet hates him, when his own party hates him, is because of the lifetime of challenges and suffering to develop a rock-hard perseverance and conviction. So when he faced crippling fear and doubt, like during the Cold War, he would return to his sense of purpose. And for him, his larger sense of purpose was to outlaw slavery. But he had a wider view as a religious man that wherever he was going through life's choppy waters, he was being pushed by a divine force. People around Lincoln would recognize this greatness. And after he dies, Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a eulogy that if this man had ruled in a period of less facility of printing, he would have become mythological and very few short years, like Aesop or Pilpay or one of the 7 wise masters. So you have a guy who, he's got the physical goods, he has that aura of greatness and purpose tied into one figure. So that's why I think that Lincoln is going to be able to take the day. But does he take the day? James, who is victorious?
Well, according to the voters of American History Fanatics, this one was pretty close. Lincoln had a lot of support, as you said, wrestler, tall guy, tough guy, long arms, long legs, freakishly strong. But in the end, those fists of Theodore Roosevelt just do him in. He just wear him down, pound, 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 pound. It's hard to, I said this on Facebook the other day, it's hard to pick somebody up and throw them if they're constantly pummeling you with their fists. So Theodore Roosevelt wins in a close fight.
All right. Well, probably the first close fight he's had so far.
Definitely, definitely.
This takes him to the final. In the other semifinal match, we have 2 generals, George Washington versus Dwight D. Eisenhower. See you there. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.